Gauteng Sports, Arts and Culture MEC Mbali Hlophe has urged survivors of the Boipatong Massacre to work with government to improve their lives. Hlophe was speaking at an event today to commemorate 30 years since 45 people were killed in that community, allegedly by men who had ties to the Inkatha Freedom Party. For more on this, let's speak to our reporter Tumaole Mohlaoli, who's in that area. Tumaole, tell us more about what the MEC has been saying.
Ultimately, the MEC has been saying that while government acknowledges that more needs to be done to assist the survivors and those who were affected by the massacre here in Boipatong 30 years ago, that the residents themselves also have a role to play, the survivors themselves, in terms of working with government, in terms of leading from the front themselves to ensure that government does know and understand what their needs are. Many, of course, of those who spoke on the podium decried the fact that Boipatong has been a forgotten community in terms of the role that it played in the liberation struggle, particularly because of that massacre, when, of course, it is said that, members of the IFP party here in the township stormed the area and butchered those who were living in the township. This is the testimonies that we heard from the survivors, who detailed how family members were slaughtered in front of their eyes and how they're struggling to deal with that trauma. And part of this assistance that they need is a counseling program. But we've got with us right now Joseph Norman Khatebe, social cohesion advocate, and he was the program director here today. And Dr. Khatebe, thanks for speaking to us here on Newzroom Afrika. You heard the testimonies and you heard how, of course, the response was from MEC Mbali Hlophe. Your overview of how Boipatong has been treated in terms of its place in the history of South Africa's liberation.
Boipatong played a very critical role in the transition between the old and the new. We know that the TRC was here, and there is still injustice that has not been fulfilled by the government. We have heard the cries that some of the victims and the families were not fully compensated. But over and above that, the reason that we are saying Boipatong is neglected, it is solely because there is lack of service delivery in Boipatong. The youth of Boipatong are unemployed, whilst Boipatong is surrounded by the industrial hub. The unemployment rate here is skyrocketing to a tune of more than 51% of youth who are lingering at home. Boipatong is neglected because the museum itself, where we have converged today, has not been officially opened after it was erected. The library that is here at Boipatong has not been launched, has not been opened. The NYDA offices, which were meant to be here, have relocated to Everton. So there's nothing significant, there's nothing to write home about, which the community of Boipatong can say we are proud.
How did this situation come to be? I know you have been trying to build bridges in terms of bringing residents together with government. You've been doing so. We saw how it played out here today with one of the preachers, the lady who was on the podium, basically saying that government has failed the people and using very strong words to the MEC and the various mayors. How did the situation come to play out in terms of the status quo?
As social cohesion advocate in nation building, it is fundamental to us to bring the disgruntled societies, the divided societies together under the name of nation building. But as we do so, we are mindful and cognizant of the issues that are on the ground. What we have done as social cohesion, what we have done as the National Department of Arts and Culture, including the province and the municipalities, we have said this is the time, and the time is now. By us converging here, we wanted Boipatong, the survivors, to narrate the story and begin to tell the world the way Boipatong it is, not the way they are seeing Boipatong. So to us, it's a victory because the government was here, and the victims, and they've been able in their own accord to narrate their stories. It was very difficult to convene here. It was very difficult to convene the stakeholders. They were saying in all these engagements, we do not want anything that is coming from government because government has forgotten us. It only remembers us when it comes to this day. And they were further saying that Boipatong has a stature of Vilakazi. Boipatong has a stature of Soweto, has a stature of Sharpeville. But the manner in which it is treated, it is not commensurate with their peers.
All right. No, thank you very much, Tate Joseph Khatebe, social cohesion advocate. And at this moment, MEC Mbali Hlophe has just stepped into the room, and we are going to speak to her now. MEC Mbali Hlophe, thank you very much for speaking to us on Newzroom Afrika. I'm well, thanks, and how are you?
Great.
Fine. You delivered a message from the podium, and your message was one of community working together and leading government and saying what it is that they need. So do you think your message was well received, and why was it important for you at such a sensitive and emotional platform to bring that message forward?
Because I think it's important. I think it's really, I mean, we listened, we came here, we listened to the community, there was a lot of complaints and people saying government's not doing this, it's not doing that, and so forth. And it was important that we just highlight and say, you know, you are sitting on top of wealth, a rich history. And you must be, why are you not working together with government to make sure that you're able to economize on it? And we gave the example of what you see as Soweto. If you like, as a street is what it is, because the community was able to come up. Of course, government was there to work together with them, but it makes things so much better when the two are working together and we're not pointing fingers. And that's what we indicated. And I thought that was the message that really needed to come across, because we're seeing far too many people not realizing what is right in front of them. People sit back and then think that, no, somehow, you know, there must be handouts and stuff. We don't, that's not the type of state we want to build. Government is there to give hand-ups, not handouts. And we really want to transfer the narrative from having individuals that are dependent on government aid and be able to really do something meaningful for themselves. If you can see, I mean, just the great stories of some of the individuals that got the 350. I met a young man who was receiving the 350, you know, that grant, the unemployment grant and so forth. He took that 350, he bought vegetables and fruits. He started to sell that. He's making 3 times that amount, and his business is growing. And those are the type of stories we want to hear, where it's a hand up, it's not a hand out. And people are not just relying on what would be a 350, but they're able to grow from it. And that needs everybody to think out of the box and everybody to be able to stand up and say, I'm here. I want to be able to work together with government. I want a better future. Because the type of future we envisage is one where people are self-sustainable. And we're not going to be able to do that if individuals themselves are not coming to the party.
And it's a very important message, but it seems that for the longest time, people have been receiving the wrong kind of narrative to say, what can we do for you? And that created an expectation. Do you think your message was well received? You have been engaging with the people now, even though, of course, many of them raised their feelings in a very sharp kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what engagements are, you know. Sometimes you have to tell people the hard truth, and sometimes it just needs some time to digest. But I know, I'm quite certain, I mean, I'm a young person, and I was even giving my own narrative to say, you know, I'm part of a cohort of a generation that was very angry. And we used to complain a lot all the time and say, elderly people are in leadership positions, why don't you leave and whatnot? As if we expect them to just vacate themselves. It doesn't work like that. So if you want to see change, you must be able to bring it about. And that's really what we did. And I was giving the same story to them and saying, you're sitting, yes, this is a sad story. We're here to commemorate people. But how do we take that story? How do we take that history and be able to economize it so that it's truly able to see the realization of the tears and the blood that has fallen to really be what feeds the trees of the future that are to grow?
And finally, as a department, will you be walking hand in hand with the community? We see that you had a hand in ensuring that this a commemorative monument is also erected. Is your door open? Are you having an open door policy?
Absolutely. And what we started, because, I mean, if there's one thing I'm quite passionate about, is making sure that we are able to realize these heritage roots. Because it's such a no-brainer. It's a low-hanging fruit. The best way, and I keep saying we've already got an example of the Vilakazi Street. It's the quickest way of how we can bring about economic development within our townships. It's in line with the act that our Premier has just now put into law, the Township Economic Development Act, and we want to see that. And we are working together with the district, with the local municipality. I was indicating to the FBO that you too must play your part, and the community at large. Because once we come here, it's the businesses, the SMMEs that need to be there. But what's equally important, communities must support those SMMEs. Because we also know that individuals don't support each other within communities. So they would rather, instead of going to Ispaza, so Makelwane, you'd rather go it down. So that also doesn't help us. So everybody must appreciate that we all have a role to play. And if we are to spread the rand in the townships, we must be deliberate. And all of us must be able to say, okay, Unekawash, I'm coming to support you. And that's what the community must do, because we can only create an enabling environment. We're saying, here's an opportunity, bring your SMMEs, let's see how we align them. But for them to be sustainable, it goes back to the community. Help each other, support each other.
Yes, I don't want to say that was the last question, but if I can sneak in another one here. You also said, speaking about the issue of an enabling environment, the issue of the naming and the issue of the monuments that we have up. We have massacre victims here in Boipatong. Are we going to see streets as government? Are you going to ensure that streets are named after them in their own communities and monuments erected beyond the grave sites that we were at earlier?
Absolutely. And we don't want, so if you look at what the apartheid regime had done, and Pretoria in particular, because it was really the hub of apartheid government. You've got a statue of Paul Kruger there, you've got a statue of Fairfoot and so forth. So you've got all these individuals who are apartheid architects, and their statues, are laden within the landscape there. We want to transform that. And the best way for us to be able to do that is by bringing in new statues that celebrate who we are, statues that speak about who we are, and also the renaming of the streets. So it's very critical to our own identity. And particularly for young people as they're growing, they must be able to see themselves in that which we make statues, in the names that are there, so that they know the value of being an individual, and particularly a black individual, and the pride that must go with it.
Thank you very much. We'll leave it there. That was Gauteng Sports and Recreation, Arts and Culture MEC Mbali Hlophe, just giving us an overview of the message that she delivered to the survivors and, of course, residents at large here, and just commemorating also the fact that it is time for South Africans in South Africa to get into that debate, get into the mindset of naming and commemorating our fallen heroes as happened here at Boipatong, and perhaps the names and monuments should go up for those who fell beyond the grave sites that were visited earlier. So that's the situation from Boipatong as it stands, from this very new and very impressive commemorative venue that has been built up to basically remind the world about what happened here 30 years ago. With that, it's back to you in the studio.
Tumaole Mohlaoli, thank you very much for that update.